Star Citizen in VR keeps getting better with every patch. And I don't just mean it looks cool for 5 minutes, I mean it's actually becoming more usable, more readable, and honestly more practical to spend real time in. That's the real shift here. Because once the novelty wears off, VR either becomes a genuine way to play Star Citizen, or it stays a clunky experiment people talk about more often than they actually use. And right now, I think it's moving the right way. The path into VR is cleaner now that support is handled through the RSI launcher. And Pimax's OpenXR runtime is integrated into Pimax Play instead of forcing extra software into the chain. So the real question is this: is Star Citizen in VR finally starting to become a legitimate way to play rather than just a cool novelty? Because after spending more time with it in 4.7, I think we're getting closer. And I'm curious, how many of you actually think Star Citizen VR is becoming a real option now, and how many of you still see it as more of a gimmick? The biggest change here is not that VR looks impressive. It's that it feels better to actually use. That's an important distinction. Back in 4.5, the big story was that experimental VR had finally arrived. Then 4.6 added a broader set of VR-specific options, and now 4.7 keeps pushing things forward with more polish and continued fixes, instead of just leaving the feature where it started. CIG's support article still describes VR as experimental, and says more iterations are expected, while 4.7's known issues page shows them actively tracking remaining problems. And that's honestly what I want to focus on in this video. Not some fantasy version of VR 5 years from now. What it feels like right now, and why the experience keeps getting stronger with each patch. As I mentioned before in my earlier VR videos, I'm using the Pimax Crystal Super, and Pimax provided it to me at no cost so I could properly put it through its paces in Star Citizen. So in that sense, they're sponsoring this by allowing me to use and review the headset, but the opinions here are still my own. What I keep coming back to is that Star Citizen in VR is becoming more livable. It's easier to stay in the headset longer. It's easier to navigate the game. It's easier to read what matters. And because of that, the whole illusion that I described in an earlier video is holding together longer. But let me ask you this. What matters more to you in VR? That first wow moment, or whether the game still feels good after an hour or two? Because for me, that second part is everything. A huge part of why this feels better now is the software side. For a while, we were basically forced into using SteamVR as part of the process. And that always added a layer that felt a little rigid. You jump into the SteamVR app first, wait for it to wake up, then wait for it to properly interface with Star Citizen. It worked, but it never felt especially clean. And in a game like Star Citizen, that matters more than people think. Most of us who play already know this very well. Because when you already have a demanding game and then you add another layer that has to sit between your headset and the game itself, it can make the whole process feel more awkward before you even load into a cockpit. With Pimax's OpenXR path now working in Star Citizen, that process feels significantly less rigid. It's a more direct route with fewer moving parts, less software dependency, and fewer opportunities for the whole thing to feel awkward before you even start playing. Its integrated OpenXR runtime in Pimax Play removes the need for additional software. VR can now be enabled directly in the RSI launcher. That's one of the main reasons moving away from SteamVR as a requirement is a good thing. It's not just about performance, even though that matters too. It's also about reducing overhead, simplifying the chain, and making the whole process feel less like a ritual, and more like a direct launch into the game. Pimax describes the integrated runtime as bringing more convenience to users by removing those extra tools from the setup path. Now, that doesn't mean instant miracle frame rates in every situation, but it does mean the path into VR feels cleaner. And when you pair that with a headset like a Crystal Super, the benefit becomes easier to appreciate because the gains are simple and visible. It gives you sharper cockpit readability, a more natural view, better clarity on instruments and targets, and a stronger sense of scale. The Pimax Crystal Super has a per-eye resolution of 3840 by 3840 for its QLED 57 ppd option, plus eye tracking and dynamic foveated rendering. So let me throw this question out to you too. Do you care more about raw frame numbers, or does the overall smoothness and simplicity of getting into VR matter just as much? Now, if you enjoy grounded Star Citizen coverage like this, subscribe, especially if you want more VR testing as these patches keep improving. This is where I think Star Citizen has made some of the most meaningful progress, because VR doesn't live or die on spectacle alone. It lives or dies on readability and usability. If the HUD is hard to work with, if markers are messy, if the inventory is frustrating, or the Mobi glass feels awkward, you're not staying in the headset no matter how incredible the ship interiors look. And this is where I think things have genuinely improved. The HUD and marker readability are better than they were. They're still not perfect and they're not finished, but they are significantly better. I'm spending less time fighting basic information and more time just playing, and that really matters. Inventory is also significantly more usable now. Honestly, I love it. That's one of those things people outside VR might underestimate, but inside the headset, it matters a lot. If your inventory flow feels clumsy, it pulls you out of the experience. And right now, it feels much more intuitive than it did earlier on. The same with the Mobi glass. It feels more manageable, more readable, and less like something I immediately want to escape from. And that's a big deal because these are the systems that either keep you immersed or remind you that you're wrestling with menus. 4.7's known issue page still lists the Mobi glass and inventory related issues, which reinforces that CIG is still refining these systems even as they improve. That's really the story of 4.7 for me in VR. It's not about one giant breakthrough. It's about Star Citizen becoming easier to live in. And that's a much more important kind of progress. So I want to ask you here, what is the one part of Star Citizen that absolutely has to feel right in VR for it to become a real way to play? Combat? The inventory? General ship flight? Or EVA? Let me know in the comments. And if you've been thinking about getting into VR for Star Citizen or other space and flight sims, the Pimax Crystal Super is one of the clearest ways to do that right now. The benefits are pretty straightforward: sharper cockpit readability, a wider, more natural view, and the kind of visual clarity that makes space sims feel less like you're looking at a display and more like you're sitting inside the machine. Pimax also has an upgrade path for existing VR users, with offers that can include up to $100 off on some upgrades or a premium gift bundle on certain Crystal Super promotions, depending on what they're running at the time. If you use my link or code HAVOC, I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. Now, with all that said, there's still a lot of work to do. This isn't me pretending that Star Citizen in VR is finished. There are still moments where the UI needs more polish. There are still marker and HUD elements that can use some more refinement. There are still edge cases with usability and consistency. And there are still performance and stability realities that come from running Star Citizen in VR in the first place. But that's actually why I'm more optimistic now than I was before. Because at this point, we're mostly talking about refinement. We're watching it slowly become more practical. So here's what I want to hear from you. Do you think Star Citizen is on the right track to become one of the most compelling VR experiences in gaming? What still needs the most work? Would you play this way full-time if CIG keeps improving it patch by patch? And if you know someone who's still writing off Star Citizen VR based on older impressions, share this video with them, because I really do think the experience has moved forward in meaningful ways. And if you enjoyed this video, drop a like. It genuinely helps. If you want to support the channel a little further, consider becoming a channel member. You'll get early access to certain content, recognition in every video, and access to exclusive channels in my Discord. It directly helps me keep making more of these videos and testing this stuff properly. And if you want the bigger picture side of all of this, check out my other VR video, because that one dives into where it could all be heading and why Star Citizen might one day become the kind of game you can get truly lost in and feel like you're part of that universe. As always, thanks for watching. Fly safe, pilots, and I'll see you in the verse. Havoc out.